Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Objectivist Girl. So today I am doing Ask Objectivist Girl, and you guys can feel free to call in. There's a link on my Ask Objectivist Girl page, as well as my Objectivist Girl page, that you guys can call in and ask me questions live. I'd love to hear from you. And until someone calls in, we're going to go ahead and answer some of the questions on the Facebook page. So let's go ahead and get started. So we've got the first question. I'm going to answer the first question, which I really liked, which was right here. Let me pull it up. It was about a trend in the information age is open-sourced information, software, and engineering plans. These items are posted to the internet by their creators for others to use and modify for free. A prime example is Linux, which is an operating system that compensates with Mac and Windows. Open source allows for the advancement of technology through cooperation rather than competition. Is there a place for this in an individualist society? More generally, what do you think of open source? I think this is a great question because objectivism is really pro-individualism, and everything is subject to the standard of individualism. So open source is great because it really encourages that individualism. It encourages an environment where we increase that individualism, and it inspires the individuality of the person because the individual is recognized for their achievement rather than being lumped under the barrier of a large company. This system also encourages forking, which is the strongest individualist statement a developer could possibly make. And if you want to know what forking is, that is essentially when a project is split off and there's a new project created, and someone wants to go in a different direction than what the developers want to go in. So a new project is created. So you get two new inventions out of one idea, and that's really cool. Open source is great. I'm a big proponent of it. I think objectivism would be too. As far as I know, objectivism would absolutely support open source. So the next question that I got was, the next serious question I got was, what are the main flaws of status objectivism? Where do you disagree with Rand? What was your journey into anarchism like? So I disagree with Rand thus far on 2 points, and they both stem from really the same thing, and that's just that I disagree with her politics, and I disagree with the idea that we need a state to protect us. I think that her arguments were very emotional. They were also a part of the slippery slope fallacy, but I think her ethics, her epistemology, her metaphysics were dead on. So I call myself an anarcho-objectivist because of the mere fact that I think that all of her philosophy is great up until politics, and I view philosophy is a hierarchy system. I think that you have to understand metaphysics, what exists, to understand philosophy, and I think you have to understand epistemology, what is knowable, to understand ethics, what is right or wrong, and what does that mean to be right or wrong. And I think you have to understand what is right or wrong, i.e. ethics, to really understand what politics should look like. And I think that her politics honestly result in anarchy. And I think that it's really a definition crisis here. Most anarchists believe in some sort of authority, but they think that authority should be funded voluntarily through a business, but so does objectivism. Objectivism thinks that government should be funded voluntarily, and honestly, if you really consider that, any agency that's funded voluntarily will have other agents enter the market, and therefore you will see competition in the market, which would result in technically anarchy. So really, objectivism and anarchism and volunteerism all agree on this central point. They just have a difference in definition and a difference of understanding of what happens when you make government voluntary. So the main flaws that I see in this are, first of all, obviously the politics and the government, but also IP, because IP is primarily protected through government. I would have no issue if people want to get themselves involved in a free market, intellectual property dispute, if they'd like that, if they could go to tort court and talk about it and debate it and go through all the functions that is tort court. But ultimately, I think that there's better ways that we could fund and support those who create things. Now that we have the advent of the internet, there's just so much free stuff out there. And also, I think intellectual property really limits competition. It limits innovation. I think that when you allow ideas to be entered into the free market like open source does, you see more inventions. And society grows much larger without intellectual property. So there must be a way that we can reward people without having to enforce intellectual property. I think that that's a poor way of doing things. And I think that this is a flaw only because the internet wasn't around when she was around, and she obviously wasn't able to take that into consideration. And that's really the issues that I see with objectivism. Other than that, I completely agree with objectivism entirely. So the next question that I got is, what is objectivism's view of charity? And I think this is a really awesome question. I'm going to quote her directly first, and then I'm going to explain to you exactly what it means. So, her view on charity is very simple, as she says. I do not consider it a major virtue, and above all, I do not consider it a moral duty. There's nothing wrong in helping others, and when they are worthy of the help, you can afford to help them. I regard charity as a marginal issue. What I am fighting is the idea that charity is a moral duty and a primary virtue. And I'm going to second that. I think that's a great stance on it. I think it's divided into two parts. First, benevolence, and also I think that the second part is just charity. So benevolence is a little different than charity, and a lot of people view charity and benevolence kind of interchangeably. I see them as a little bit different. So benevolence is basically when neither party, when one party, yourself, is not going to be hurt by the action, the other party is going to be greatly benefited, and you really don't have a lot of background on this person. They're kind of a stranger, and you're not really sure whether they have value. You assume that they have value. You help them out. There's nothing on you that ruins your advantage. It doesn't hurt you in any way. So therefore, it's just better to go ahead, help the person, and maybe somewhere along the line, they will greatly benefit you as well. So we assume that all humans have value through the virtue of benevolence. And this is just open objectivist. Closed objectivists don't agree with this principle. But benevolence is a virtue for me because I think that all people have value unless they prove to me that they don't have value. In which case, I stop being benevolent with them. I don't help them out when it's not going to be a detriment to me, but I help to them because I don't see them as helpful or desirable, and that's really just when someone's hurt me or done something to create a disadvantage in my life. So charity is also just one of those things like benevolence where you can choose to do it or choose not to, but really charity is about what makes you happy. Now, I can choose to spend my time doing my job or doing Objectivist Girl. Objectivist Girl is a value to me. Now, I also personally really love helping the children out in Uganda. It's my very personal pleasure. I get a lot of happiness out of it by donating to Uganda. And so I like to help that charity. It brings me happiness. And so that's my reward for the good deed that I do. So it's not like I'm not getting anything back or giving of myself. It's really that it's mutually beneficial for me because I get that happiness. Now, if it were between donating to Uganda or benefit or the money that I need to run Objectivist Girl, obviously I choose Objectivist Girl. In that case, charity is not a good idea. So that's basically her view on charity. Again, guys, if you want to call in, there's a link on the Ask Objectivist Girl page. I would love to hear from you guys. Feel free to call in. So the next question that I was asked, next serious question I was asked, is how would you define objectivism to a young child? What is the most simplified way of explaining the concept? So I would say that the best way to explain objectivism to a child would be to look at core values that a child can understand. One of them would be, of course, benevolence. Understanding that as long as this person hasn't hurt you, you should value them as a human being, respect them, and even do nice things for them if it's not going to hurt you. So what I would suggest is also, with this, is respecting that child's decision. A lot of parents, if a child decides they don't want to deal with another child, will say, oh, you need to give him another chance, you know, you need to forgive this kid. But, you know, let your kid make his own decisions about who he wants to be involved in. I mean, you wouldn't want your parent at your age to say, you know, just forgive him. And you would want someone to respect your decision not to deal with other adults. So treat them with that same respect. Treat their value judgments with that same respect, because they have different values than you. Just because they're your spawn doesn't mean that they have the same values as you. And that's the other thing. You need to allow your child to develop their own values. You need to tell them that the things that they want to pursue are important. And if they want to go to school for music, if that's not a value to you, you don't have to fund it, but allow them, help them find the resources to be able to pursue the dreams they want. If in life they decide that that's not a good decision, then they'll go ahead and go to school, and you can feel free to fund them if you find this different career path to be more desirable. Don't hold your child back from whatever it is that you want to do. Aesthetics are just as valuable as anything else, and to say otherwise is just to not understand aesthetics. People get much pleasure out of aesthetics. So the next thing that I would say is teaching your child sharing. A lot of parents want to talk about sharing. And so when you're talking about sharing, a lot of parents talk about just, you know, giving another child your toys for a while. Instead, teach your child to trade. Teach your child to acquire something else from that child, from the other child, that they would like to play with, and they can trade. So blocks for the doll that the child is playing with. Try to teach them that it doesn't have to be them giving things up. They can be getting something in return, and that's the beauty of free trade and mutually beneficial exchanges. And children are going to be much less resentful of interacting with other children if you teach them how to trade with one another. Again, guys, if you want to call in, feel free. I'm here, and there's a link on the Ask Objectivist Girl page. I'm saying that for the new viewers. So the next question that I was asked is about the Libertarian Party. I thought this was an interesting question. It wasn't really a question. It was more like, I think the Libertarian Party is the only way to fix America, and yada, yada, yada. I know you guys know what my view is on the Libertarian Party. I don't like parties. I don't think that they are beneficial to people. I understand that right now the idea is to fight fire with fire, and to start a party, because parties are really the only way to get into government at this point. And it's unfortunate that it's that way, because we really should have individuals running on their own merits, and it shouldn't be about money. It should be about the individual and their qualities. So I would say that I don't agree with the party, and honestly this person's reliance on party and on other people kind of makes me a little alarmed. But that really leads into, I think, the next question. No, there's another question after it. I will go back to it, but there's a question about, is there any problem or objective wrong with believing in a supernatural being or force so long as one's ethical and life decisions are completely based on reason. Okay, so it's not just about reason. Objectivism isn't just about reason, and I understand that epistemologically it is about reason and rationality and thinking, but before that, and this is why I say philosophy is a hierarchy system, you need to understand that reason and rationality can only be used in reality, and when you metaphysically deny objectivism, you can't use objectivist ethics to apply to a metaphysics that's incorrect. And when you accept a higher power, anything that is higher than you, I'm talking about the state, a god, a spirit, a force, anything else, when you accept that anything is higher than the individual, you are denying metaphysical reality. You are denying the idea that individuals exist solely for themselves, and they have to take care of themselves by their very nature. You are the only one that can keep you alive. And therefore, if you deny metaphysically that you have to keep you alive, you'll die. Unless, of course, there are government programs to keep you sustained, but eventually the money will run out. And there will be something that you don't get on time or whatever. The point is that you have to accept that your life is your own and you are responsible for it. But that responsibility comes with a lot of ability with it. You have the right to pursue your own happiness. You have that right because you take care of your life. So therefore, anything you put above the self is metaphysically incorrect according to objectivism. You can't accept yourself as the primary, as the most. If there's a voice in your head or any higher power telling you that you should do something besides take care of yourself and put yourself first, and there is no higher power that you could serve that would possibly put you before it. So, metaphysically, a god doesn't work with objectivism, and therefore it doesn't matter whether you want to follow the ethics or metaphysics or even the politics of objectivism. You're metaphysically incorrect, so therefore you're incapable of following objectivism sufficiently. The rest of it is lost to you. So the next question, let's see, we already answered about charity. The next serious question is, what is the objectivist view on economics? Now, I haven't covered economics yet, but it is laissez-faire capitalism, most closely Austrian economics. And I'm sure some of you have heard Jeffrey Tucker on Austrian economics. I'm going to leave him to the issues with Austrian economics. I'm proud of him for standing up for his perception or his ideas of Austrian economics. I think that he made some really valid points. But most closely, Austrian economics, she was a big fan of Mises. She loved Mises, and Mises loved her. He wrote her a gushing letter. And so did Rothbard, actually. So the view on economics is laissez-faire capitalism, most essentially. Austrian economics just happens to adhere to laissez-faire capitalism. Laissez-faire capitalism means free trade. It means the ability to own your own business, not have to answer to anyone else, that money is free. So Bitcoin would be the best adherence to that idea. So it's not free, but it's free is the wrong word. Free, by free, I mean that is not owned by any government entity. It is existent of itself. It doesn't exist within an entity, and it's not controlled by anyone else. So laissez-faire capitalism is best practiced when you use products like Bitcoin or gold or silver, and I did a great article on why it is that precious metals and other currencies that are not US dollar and not able to be inflated are great, but honestly, Ayn Rand gave an awesome definition for what is money, and I'd like to go over that real quickly and tell you why. I'm going to compare U.S. currency to Bitcoin, and hopefully that'll help a lot of people understand why it is that U.S. currency is not as valuable as Bitcoin. So first of all, to fulfill the requirement of money. It has to be a material commodity which is imperishable. Now first, Bitcoin is imperishable. It can be lost in a wallet, but it still exists. It just can't be destroyed. U.S. currency can be destroyed, as I proved in my one of my latest videos where I burned U.S. currency. I did prove that U.S. currency is perishable, and very easily so. So I proved that it was perishable, and at the same time I did some grassroots deflation of the dollar. So I was pretty proud of myself for that one. Money has to be rare. U.S. currency with its printing is becoming less and less rare. Bitcoin only has 21 million blocks that can be broken down by miners, and right now there is a little over 13 million in circulation, and after that 21 million, no others can possibly be created. It is finite, but as you will know, just because it is finite does not make it rare. So the other reason that Bitcoin is rare and U.S. currency is not is because Bitcoin has to be traded through a certain exchange, and that is one of the reasons that is rare. And I made a really great video on this, and you guys should check it out. But it's also homogeneous, and the U.S. dollar is homogeneous as well. I'm gonna agree with that. Sorry, I forgot to set my phone on silent. So the U.S. dollar is homogeneous, and so is Bitcoin, which means that it is the same as itself. So it's homogeneous, easily stored. Now, arguably, U.S. currency is not easily stored. Bitcoin is, because it's just put in a wallet, and it's, you know, it takes up no room other than the size of your phone in your pocket, and this is one of the larger phones. But U.S. currency, if you have 100 ones, that's not very easily stored in your, physical wallet. So, it could be argued that U.S. currency is not easily stored, but I'll go ahead and give that U.S. currency is easily stored, and I'll consent to that. Not subject to wide fluctuations of value. The U.S. currency is obviously subject to wide fluctuations of value. It's been printed over and over again ever since we've gotten off the gold standard. Bitcoin is not. Again, it only has 21 million, so therefore it is not subject to wide fluctuations of value because it doesn't have that issue, and always in demand among those you trade with. Now, Bitcoin right now is kind of in a state of transition. We're not sure how it's going to turn out, but honestly, with different companies accepting it, such as Newegg and Overstock, accepting Bitcoin, I see this growing. It will be widely accepted at some point. So therefore, at some point, Bitcoin will meet this standard of money. But right now, it's the only standard of money that is not meeting. So, but U.S. currency is actually becoming less and less accepted in other countries. China has been debating for years about sending back its humongous store of U.S. currency because it just doesn't find it valuable. And I think we're going to see that more and more as the U.S. dollar is printed. Most people don't want to trade in it. Mostly the U.S. dollar has been held up by the petrodollar because U.S. currency before recently was the only currency in which you could trade for oil. And now the monopoly on U.S. currency to oil has been ended, and so I think you're starting to see in the U.S. a large deflation of the dollar, or inflation of the dollar. I'm sorry, and its use is deflating. People don't want to accept it anymore in other countries because of the fact that it's not the petrodollar anymore, and they can't buy oil with it. It's not backed by something that's physical, and honestly, the petrodollar was kind of like the gold standard for a while. Oil backed it, and now you're seeing the decrease of that dollar. So, there's that. The next question that was asked, now that we're moving on from economics, I know I get off on a rant, but it's really important that people understand what money is and what it's not. So the next question about objectivism is it important to adhere to laws and pay taxes that would contribute to the welfare programs, or should people stick to their personal convictions as individuals and break the law in order to maintain their individuality? I understand that people can go both ways on this. There's not really an objectively correct answer to this because values are objective, they're not intrinsic. So if values were intrinsic, there would be a correct answer despite reality. But the reality of the situation is that sometimes you can defy laws and it's beneficial, and sometimes you can't, and it really depends on your status. There's a lot of celebrities that can get by with defying laws that we can't. There's a lot of, Alex Jones could probably get by defying laws a lot better than we could just because he's a public figure. But it's really about your value judgment. Honestly, my objective answer to this question would be no. I wouldn't defy the law. Because Ayn Rand stated a very important principle in her Ethics of Emergencies, which is that life is the ultimate value. If you want to have any values, you have to value life, because life is the starting point. So if you don't have life, you can't actually value anything else in life. So if you give up that life, aka you're put in a cage, and the government owns you, and you can't do anything anymore, then you're giving up the ability to pursue other values. Now, if your highest value is to fight the government by defying laws, I really hope that you've based that in reality. You've accepted the fact that you may end up in a cage, but if it is worth it to you to spend your life defying laws, then as long as you have based that on the facts of reality, and that is understanding the consequences and fully accepting those consequences, then I say go ahead. But ultimately, I think if you give up your life, you're not able to value anything, and that value of life has allowed you to defy those laws. And so therefore you should never do anything that is anti-life, because that's anti-reason and anti-rationality. I'm joking, but that's one of Ayn Rand's bigger quotes. So let's see what else we got. Yes. I thought this was interesting. I'd like to do more research about it, but the question was, how does an objectivist reconcile intellectual property without misusing the labor creation metaphor? Now, my question was, what is the labor creation metaphor? And Craig answered this. He said, man must seek value for his life. Number 2, he then seeks value. He then acts to acquire that value. And then 3, he then should be allowed to keep those values from his labor. So property must be considered to be a product of labor, as should IP. And I already talked to you guys a little bit about intellectual property in this video. I don't personally accept intellectual property. I think Ayn Rand did because it was before the advent of the internet. I think that she couldn't possibly have taken the internet into consideration. I think there are better ways to reward people. But the response to Craig's understanding of it, and I think that's great. Objectively, according to Objectivism, his comment is completely correct. Those 3 sets are totally in accordance to Objectivism. I think it's great. I don't accept it just because of the advent of the internet. I think there are better ways to support people, and I think people are going to get things for free. And as long as we go along this practice, people are going to steal things from people. And I'd like to make our world less theft prone. And I think that if there are other ways to reward people other than just turning people who download things illegally and into thieves, I think that we should explore those options. But the response was that that values are subjective. And I just did a video on values and why they're not subjective. Now, there are 3 types of values, and I think that that I covered these pretty thoroughly, but I'm going to go over them really quickly. Intrinsic basically means that values exist outside of man's consciousness. So basically, there are these values that just exist in the world, and we just need to recognize them. It's normally what statists or people who believe in God support is the intrinsic theory of value. Basically, they state that God wants us to do something, and therefore we should do that thing, and we need to discover what it is that we are supposed to do and what we are supposed to value, such as charity. That is incorrect because, as we can see from the dollar, as the dollar inflates and we print more, you can see that a person's product's price goes up. It's not that they value the product more in the store, it's that the dollar is worth less. So therefore, worth less, isn't that great? So the dollar is worth less. So they are requiring more dollars for the same value, the same product. So we can see that values are not intrinsic based on the fact that the dollar is valued, but its value changes all the time based on inflation rate. So, and other factors, of course. But there's also subjective value. Now, subjective value is based on emotion or whim. It can change at any time. So at any moment, if I want to diet and exercise and lose weight, I will go about doing that. But if any moment during that process I want ice cream, I'll just give up everything, give up my entire diet, and just eat the ice cream. Because values that are subjective can change at any time, and it doesn't matter. That's why values are objective. Values are subject to the person's desires and all of the things that are based in reality. Yes, emotions are important, but they're just one factor. So therefore, it is objective values. And I hope that you'll check out that video because it really helps guide you through the idea of values being objective. It's called How to Achieve All Your Dreams Through Objectivism. And it really does explain how objectivism can help you achieve all your dreams. So I hope that answers that question. The next question was, in what ways does objectivism differ from volunteerism? Now, I've decided this is such a good question that I'm going to go ahead and do an entire episode with Garrett Lafferty tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my live show. It will be a 30-minute show, and we will discuss the difference because he is a volunteerist, and I think that it would be very helpful to discuss that. And the last question, which I'm going to go over unless someone would like to call in and talk to me, there's a link in the Ask Objectivist Girl page that you can go ahead and go to. The last question that was asked is, do you have a summary response regarding the various objectivist groups which have expressed rejection of your interpretation and elaboration of objectivism? I do. I think that we need to remember all the time that if we want more people to be objectivists, we need to understand what objectivism is. And objectivism is the pursuit of objective reality. And objective reality has changed since Ayn Rand's time. The internet has been created. There have been immense amounts of technological advances, and this has changed the way things are. If we were to live in a technocracy, there would be no reason to have a government at all. These are things that we need to take into consideration. Adhering strongly to what she said is not the way to be an objectivist. She did not want to be a god or a cult leader or a prophet. She wanted to help people be able to define objective reality for themselves and pursue their rationality and their goals and their ethics and their values. I think that that is the thing that we need to work towards most. It's not this strict adherence to any principle she set down. She's not a god. She's not a prophet. She's not a cult leader. She was a woman that was more right about reality than anyone else I've ever seen. She just got it. And I think that we need to recognize her genius. I think that her ethics are something that everyone should aspire to. Her metaphysics are taken from Aristotle, and Aristotle was just dead on. And her epistemology just simply is just a reiteration of her metaphysics, because if existence exists, of course knowledge is knowable, because things exist to be known. So I think that we need to take that into consideration. We need to stop fighting. And we need to realize that there are people out there that are interested in following her metaphysics, her epistemology, her ethics, and even sometimes her politics, and stop turning those people off that just want to follow the first three. Because following the ethics, you can live in the kind of society that you would like to live in. And objectivists are not recognizing this. They're not understanding that when people are drawn to her ethics, that we are winning the philosophical renaissance that we would like to see. We don't have any say on the government right now. They are so large that it's not even an issue whether I believe anarchism should be correct or minarchism should be correct. I believe in a non-violent revolution, a revolution of the mind. Therefore, we will have to go to minarchism first, before we can even consider anarchism. So why don't we work together, we put our differences aside, we try and move people towards her ethical views, and we actually work together to get to minarchism. And then when we get to minarchism, we can have this argument. But honestly, I've said my piece about it. I'm glad that many people have supported me in my coming out as an anarchist, as an anarcho-objectivist. But honestly, it's time to move back to her ethics, her metaphysics, and her epistemology, mainly her ethics, and really talk about what it is that makes me love objectivism through everything. I stay with objectivism because of the ethics, and that's what I'm going to be talking about mostly from now on. So as long as you guys don't want to call in, because it looks like we don't have anybody that wants to call in, I am going to go ahead and close it off and say knowledge is not for all men, but for those who seek it. So, guys, really, keep seeking.